Hello, welcome to EPG Pathshala. Today in this module of the paper Ecology and Society, we are going to talk about an ecological thinker whose name is Tim Ingold. Tim Ingold is a professor of social anthropology at University of Aberdeen, and he is a fellow of both the British Academy and the Royal Society of Edinburgh. Tim Ingold was born in 1948. His father was a famous mycologist, Cecil Terence Ingold. Tim was enrolled in Leighton Park School in Reading, UK, and attended Churchill College, Cambridge, where he initially studied natural sciences but shifted to anthropology. Talking about how he shifted to studying anthropology, Ingold states, quote, "At school, I had done well in mathematics, and thanks to a wonderful teacher, I had been fired by a passion for physics. It was assumed that I should go to university to read natural sciences, but my initial enthusiasm soon gave way to disillusionment. Like so many of my contemporaries, I was appalled by the extent to which science had reneged both on its sense of democratic responsibility and on its original commitment to enlarge the scope of human knowledge, and had allowed itself to become subservient to the demands of military-industrial complex. The scientific establishment, it seemed to me, was so massively institutionalized, internally specialized, and oppressively hierarchical that as a professional scientist, one could never be more than a small cog in a huge juggernaut of an enterprise. Toward the end of my first year at university, I went to see my tutor and politely informed him over a glass of sherry, this was Cambridge, that natural sciences was not for me and that I was seeking a discipline where there was more room to breathe. It would be exciting, I thought, to join in a subject still on the make, one perhaps that was in the same formative stage that physics was in at the time of Galileo. He received his BA in social anthropology from the University of Cambridge in 1970 and his PhD in 1976. Tim Ingold's doctoral research work was about Skolt Sami of northeastern Finland, studying their ecological adaptations, social organization, and ethnic politics. His early concerns, as articulated in doctoral research with northern circumpolar peoples, looked comparatively at hunting, pastoralism, and ranching as alternative ways in which such people have based a livelihood on reindeer or caribou. Ingold began his career at the University of Helsinki from 1973-74, where he spent 12 months writing up his field material. The monograph emerging from his doctoral research was titled "The Skolt Laughs Today," 1976. He then moved to University of Manchester, where he started teaching a course titled Environment and Technology, which was basically an introduction to the subfield of cultural anthropology. This was soon to be renamed as Environment and Economy. In the year 1986, two important conferences took place: the World Archaeological Congress, Southampton, in which Ingold organized a series of sessions devoted to cultural attitudes to animals, and the fourth International Conference on Hunting and Gathering Societies in London, of which he was a principal organizer. Ingold edited one of the volumes to arise from the Southampton Congress titled "What is an Animal?", published in 1988, and was co-editor of the two-volume work Hunters and Gatherers, consisting of papers from the London Conference and published in the same year. Through a reconsideration of tool-making and speech as criteria of human distinctiveness, Ingold became interested in the connection in human evolution between language and technology. With Kathleen Gibson, he organized an international conference on this theme in 1990, and the resulting volume, edited by Gibson and Ingold, titled Tools, Language and Cognition in Human Evolution, was published in 1993. Since then, Ingold has sought ways of bringing together the anthropologies of technology and art, leading to his current view of the centrality of skilled practice. At the same time, he has continued his research and teaching in ecological anthropology, and influenced by the work of James Gibson on perceptual systems, he has been exploring ways of integrating ecological approaches in anthropology and psychology. At University of Manchester, Ingold became professor in 1990 and Max Gluckman professor in 1995. Starting from 1990-1991, he developed two other courses. One was called Culture, Perception and Cognition, and the other was titled Anthropology of Art and Technology. He was editor of a journal called Man. That was the Journal of Royal Anthropological Institute from 1990 to 1992, and he edited the Routledge Companion Encyclopedia of Anthropology that was published in 1994. In 1999, he moved to University of Aberdeen, where he went on to establish UK's newest Department of Anthropology. In 1999, he also held the position of being president of the Anthropology and Archaeology section of the British Association for the Advancement of Science. Before moving to University of Aberdeen, Ingold, along with few others, had founded a seminar to explore the relations between art, architecture and anthropology. This seminar was rather remarkable for the commitment that Ingold and his co-organizers expressed towards grounding discussions in practical activity, ranging from making string to repairing a dry stone wall. At University of Aberdeen, Ingold started teaching a new course on anthropology, archaeology, art and architecture, which he taught intermittently from 2004 to 2011. And finally, this course and his teaching got converted into a book entitled Making 2013. Honorary doctorate. In recognition of his achievements in the field of anthropology, the Faculty of Education of Leuphana University of Lüneburg awarded him an honorary doctorate in philosophy in the year 2015. The citation reads as below, I quote, "His phenomenon-oriented transdisciplinary research connects aspects common to disciplines such as music, art, linguistics, anthropology, environmental research, phenomenology, and educational sciences. His anthropological work has proved to be extremely influential in various disciplines ranging from biology to theology. Ingold's core hypothesis proposes that personhood rests on the biosocial process of becoming human. Humans are more human becomings rather than human beings. Beyond abstract nature, nurture, and subject-object separations, the relational animal homificans emerges as activity. To human is a verb, where an animate lifestyle develops from a prior passivity. This education is understood as a continuous educare leading out. Fixed or changing perspectives and intentional distinct destinations are not appropriate to human will. Quite the contrary, it is the dynamic perspective of the open path which generates attention in the midst of environment." Let's now talk about Tim Ingold's writing. As we talked earlier, in 1976, his first fieldwork got published as the book The Scott Lapse Today from Cambridge University Press. This was followed in 1980 by another book called Hunters, Pastoralists and Ranchers, Reindeer Economies and the Transformations. This second book resulted from a further spell of ethnographic fieldwork, this time among Finnish rather than Sami people, that was undertaken in the district of Salla in the northern Finland in 1979-1980. The purpose of this research was to examine how farming, forestry and reindeer herding were combined on the level of local livelihood. This was to investigate the reasons for the intense rural depopulation in the region and to compare the long-term effects of post-war resettlement here with those experienced by the Scott Sami. In 1986, he wrote another book called Evolution and Social Life that was published by Cambridge University Press, wherein he attempts, among other things, to establish this complementarity thesis. This book extensively attempted to present what had been written in the disciplines of anthropology and biology in an effort to cohere the connection between human beings as biological organism and as a social subject or person. Setting out from such a complementarity thesis, Ingold has repeatedly argued that human beings must simultaneously be constituted both as organisms within system of ecological relations and as persons within systems of social relations and as persons within systems of social relations. The Appropriation of Nature, Essays on Human Ecology and Social Relations was also a book that he got published from Manchester University Press in the year 1986. This was a collection of essays, and Ingold tried to explain in this the interplay between human sociality, that is human beings as subject person with his or her interactions with other members in the community, and human organicality, that is human being as an organism interacting with other elements and organisms in the natural world. Recalling that moment of his thinking and writing in 1986-88, Ingold recollects, I quote, "Yet I was increasingly troubled by this splitting of the human into person and organic components, partitioned respectively into the separate domains of society and nature, and in 1988 it all collapsed, a moment I vividly recall as a watershed when everything I had argued until then seemed irredeemably wrong," unquote. Referring to his old class notes for introductory lecture for the course Environment and Economy, the class notes that has the date called October 4th, 1988, he recalls wherein his notes abruptly ended, I quote, "Ultimately, of course, the aim should be to transcend such dichotomies as economic versus ecological, social versus natural, person versus individual, because we are not made up of two semi-independent parts as the Homo duplex model has it. That is just a first approximation," unquote. In 1989, in a lecture presented to Royal Anthropological Institute entitled "An Anthropologist Looks at Biology," Ingold presented his first effort to extend relational thinking to biological domains as well. Recollecting this moment, he writes, I quote, "My aim was to restore the person to the continuum of organic life, not in the reductionist model fashion of sociobiology, by putting it all down to genes, but by repositioning the organisms as a locus of growth within a continuous field, and by thinking of evolution not statistically but topologically, as the unfolding of that field. Life, I insisted, is not in organisms, rather organisms are in life. Or in other words, living things are both generated and held in place within the ever unfolding matrix of relations to which they contribute in their activity. This meant giving a central place to growth and development in the constitution of the life forms, and here my inspiration came from the work of D. R.K. Thompson on growth and form that had so inspired me as a child. I was at last coming full circle," unquote. His other edited volume, which is very interesting, is called Key Debates in Anthropology, that he published in 1996 from Routledge. Then there is another interesting book that he brought out in the year 2000 from Routledge called The Perception of the Environment, Essays on Livelihood, Dwelling and Skill. In these essays, Ingold tried to develop a new synthesis alternative to the mainstream alliance of cognitive sciences and neo-Darwinism, which would draw together insights from the developmental biology, ecological psychology and phenomenology, starting from the premises that the organism person is not a bounded, self-contained entity set over against the world, but a knot that is perpetually reveling and unraveling within an unbounded matrix of relations, unquote. He has an essay called Two Reflections on Ecological Knowledge in an edited volume titled Nature, Knowledge, Education, Cognition, Identity. The nature-culture binary and dichotomy comes under an intense criticism in an edited volume that he brought out with a title Biosocial Becomings, Integrating Social and Biological Anthropology in 2013 from Cambridge University Press. This was resulted from the panel organized by Team Ingold and Gisli Paulson in 2010 as part of the EASA conference entitled Human Becomings Beyond the Biological and Social. Both the editors and several contributors set out to demonstrate the limits of these concepts in explaining human representations and practices. Writing a review of this volume, Perig Pitro, a Portuguese scholar, states, and I quote, "Ingold's work has long expressed a desire to go beyond dichotomies. This is one of the main themes of the perception of the environment, which proposed studying organisms without abstractly disconnecting them from their environment. His introduction here revisits ideas from that classic text, while affirming even more strongly an alternative conception of biology on the basis of which a renewed anthropology should develop. He begins by polemically declaring that neo-Darwinism is dead, before going on to vigorously critique the negative influences of this, in his eyes erroneous, theory of explanations of human phenomena. He reproaches a certain kind of naturalist epistemology for interpreting the evolution of culture on the basis of the Darwinian paradigm by establishing an analogy between the genes and memes. For several decades now, Marshall Sahlins has been battling against sociobiology, proclaiming loud and clear the primacy of cultural determinants. This is not the strategy of Ingold, who seeks instead to dismantle biology's very concepts in order to transform the usage that the social sciences may make of biology. Without getting trapped in reductionism, Ingold's criticism targets the notions of evolution and design. Evolution, in our view, does not lie in the mutation, recombination, replication, and selection of transmissible traits. It is rather a life process, and at the heart of this process is ontogenesis. In a paper that he has recently written, titled From Science to Art and Back Again, The Pendulum of an Anthropologist, that came out last year in 2016 and was published in AUNSC, he looks back over 4 decades of his academic career as professional anthropologist, starting with an orientation that was heavily weighted towards the natural science and ending in a project that seeks to integrate anthropology with the practices of art, architecture, and design. Drawing parallels between the tasks confronting a mycologist and an anthropologist, he states, I quote, "Just as mycology subverts deeply held intuitions in the biological sciences, so, it now seems to me, anthropology does the same for the social sciences," unquote. He calls anthropologists mycologists of the social and addresses them as, quote, "the awkward squad, the jesters, the fools who slide up to the power and chip away at pretensions," unquote. In his opinion, awkwardness of the anthropologists lie in their aptitude of, quote, "seeing the world of intricately enmeshed relations rather than one already divided into discrete and autonomous entities." He underlines that anthropology for me is not about describing the world or wrapping it up. It is in the first place about attending to presence, about noticing and responding in kind. It means acknowledging that persons and other things are there, that they have their own beings and their own lives to lead, and that it behoves us for our own good to pay attention to their existence and what they are telling us. Only then can we learn. The same, I think, might be said for art. It too is an opening on the world rather than an attempt at closure, an opening that exposes the practitioner to its trials and to its gifts. That is why art combines well with anthropology but not with ethnography. For what art and anthropology opens up, ethnography, like art history, seeks to constrain, unquote. Thanks.